over there. So I always forget to press the red button. But I appreciate everyone coming out last session of the afternoon to talk about ethics, which is the most rousing thing to talk about in the afternoon. So hopefully I will keep you awake. If not, it's a small room. I'll notice you fall asleep, but don't worry about it. So when I was a kid, I remember the day that I was helping my dad clean the garage, and he pulls out this old dusty box. And in the box, he pulls out, and he goes, "Chris, come here." He pulls me over, and he opens it up, and inside were his old comic books. And he was a comic book collector when he was a kid in the 50s and 60s, and I got to see these amazing comic books from way before I was born, and I dove into them, and I loved them. So then as a kid, I grew up reading my own comics, and now that we're on movie, I think it's like 17 or whatever of Marvel, there's something about superheroes that continue to span the eras and generations that inspire and keep our attention. And I think part of that is, come on in, you're fine. Oh, all right. I think part of that is because we look at superheroes and we aspire to be one. It's always this personification of something that we want to be, or that they have the powers that we wish we could have. But what's come to my realization over the last year and a half or so is that we are superheroes in just a different form. Come on in. No. I have a feeling that's going to be happening a lot because people are like, there we are. So we're building really cool things with Drupal. One of my favorite things about the Tesla site is I like to say that it takes longer for this page to load than that car to go 0 to 60. So not that they have a bad CDN, they just have really cool cars. But we're doing billions with a B in transactions and commerce. We're building these massive systems. I've personally had a part in building the CrossFit Games. And this site had, I believe the stats were 3 million concurrent users at whenever they would make a major announcement. 3 million people constantly hitting refresh on the same site, right? That's a massive site. I've been able to work with technology that the World Bank has been using in West Africa to help farmers to gain access to fertilizer and grow their crops. And I realized what we do as web developers, to many people, it's the same thing that Superman does. It's just magic, right? And I had this realization, surprisingly, over some shisha and tea when I was in Istanbul after DrupalCon Europe in Vienna. And I sat down and I started talking with these guys. They go, "What do you do?" I go, "Well, I build websites." And he goes, "Oh," he was a silver jeweler and dealer. And he goes, "My website's always crashing." He's like, "Do you know like how to keep a website up?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can actually. I have friends that run massive hosting companies, and they can keep your site up 100% of the time." And he's like, "Well, what about e-commerce?" He's like, "That's the thing that I've always wanted to do." But he's like, "Every time I try to get somebody to build an e-commerce site for me, it doesn't work. Like, how long does it take you to build an e-commerce site?" And I was like, "Kickstart with a couple others." I was like, 4 hours, and I can have you up and running. Like. And then you just see the minds explode, and I realize, like, we're doing really cool stuff. And so if we are superheroes of the web, and we have this immense power to go and build and create, we have the same level of responsibility that a superhero has to protect the people of their city or of their universe or wherever they're at. We have that same level of duty on the web. And the reason why is because I love this quote from Batman. It's, "Some people just want to watch the world burn," right? There are bad people out there. We have to realize that. And so this talk is kind of a progression. As I was mentioning earlier, I initially presented some of these concepts in London, recently in Seattle, and a couple of other camps. But we're going to be talking about the ethics of privacy and technology and the power that comes with the responsibility of creating. Because we're all creators, whether we're designers, whether we're content creators, site builders, developers, we're all creators and we have a responsibility. And so quick caveat, these thoughts are my own. They're not of my employer. If you look up my bio, you'll see that I'm a member of a government committee, all this fun stuff. So this is the big caveat. These views are my own. They don't reflect anybody that I'm associated with, though I don't think they're going to be controversial at all. And so I'm going to be asking some questions during this time, and I'm not going to have all the answers. So apologies now if I like set off this train and I don't give you the right answer. But when I think about, damn it, this slide always gets me. This is why I build the web, right? God, those are my superheroes. And I think about, what's my first memory of the web? My first memory of the web was Prodigy. My old 14.4 dial-up modem. I got into Mad Maze. I could never figure this shit out. It was always really hard. And you couldn't really save it, so unless you had the ciphers and all that weird stuff, and it was just hard. But as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, I was on that. And I was browsing the web, and I was having a great time, and we then got access to this thing called the internet. We'd only be able to use it for 10 minutes, and then your time would be up type of thing, right? And you'd have to go get another demo DVD or CD and put it in and do all that. And so what I'm going through now as a father is, what type of web do I want to build? I have the ability to build. We have the ability to build. But what type of web do we want to build? And luckily, Dries is also thinking about this. If you haven't seen, he posted an article on CNN recently. And the title is, "The Internet Has Become a Dark Place. I Want the Old One Back." And the whole article is about how, because of privacy and extremism and the tools that we are building on the web has become a really dark place, and it's not where he wants his children to be. And so he's trying to figure out, how do we build this web, if you will, or this place that we want our children to be, or the next generation to enjoy. And so my summary of this is, the web as we knew it is dead. And we killed it. Not we in this room, but we collectively, as technologists, as creators, killed the web that we grew up with. We were given this really cool thing where we had chat boards and, Napster, and you get all the free music you want, all this fun stuff, right? There was all this like counterculture, you could do whatever you want, but everyone had this kind of cheery idea of what the web was. It was still a bad place then. Don't get me wrong, there was always bad things going on. But nowadays, kids are just inundated with whether it's white supremacy, or whether it's extremism, or whether it's online bullying, cyberbullying. There's so much just junk going on the web. And we killed it because with the ability to create comes the ability to manipulate. So as we give the ability to other people to create, we publish these technologies that build platforms to give people the ability to create. We give them the ability to manipulate. And so what is our responsibility for what we create and what we give to others to let them create? Facebook ended up banning Alex Jones. Hopefully you all know who he is. He's a vile human being. But Facebook banned him, and Twitter didn't. And then all of a sudden Twitter comes along and is like, oh yeah, maybe we should do that too, right? After a bunch of PR nightmares and public outcry. But their first reaction was, nope, we're not going to do that. More recently, WordPress updated their terms of service so that WordPress.com, so that if you post images of a minor without the parents' consent, they can be taken down. And this was a way that they could take off the Sandy Hook denier websites off their platform. And so we're seeing now these large platforms that are giving people the ability to espouse hate, starting to try to rein that back in. And don't get me wrong, nobody builds a Twitter expecting Alex Jones to be on there, right? You don't build Twitter being like, this is going to be a platform for people to just, ruin the world, right? And people don't build Facebook thinking that Cambridge Analytica is going to scrape everyone's data and try to manipulate elections, right? That's not their intent. But the problem is, we build technology with no idea of the full consequences of that technology. We build it because it's cool, right? Hey, I've got this really good idea. I'm going to go build this and just launch it out into the world. And because of how connected we are now, we can just put it out there and millions upon millions of people can see it. And so I keep coming back to this question in a lot of my conversations around this is, just because we can, should we? Should we be doing what we're doing? And the answer to that most of the time is yes, right? If you're sitting around thinking up a new idea, thinking up a new technology, or how you want to use a certain technology, stop and ask yourselves, just because we can, should we? Right? What are the responsibilities and what are the implications of what we're building? A lot of the times now we're talking about big data, right? Big data, big data, big data, data lakes, data, warehouses, whatever you want to call them. But big data becomes big responsibilities. And what we're looking at now is that there's an awesome article in The Economist that basically, and this is from a few years ago, but it states that data is now the most valuable asset in the world. It's not oil anymore. Data is the most valuable asset. But if you look at it, you've got about 5 or 6 brands that are just sucking up all the data in the world, right? They're becoming these massively powerful brands because they have all the data. But with that data comes big responsibility. And I don't know if anyone has seen the STRAVA incidents, or anyone know what STRAVA is? All right, a couple of folks. So STRAVA is a fitness app that you can tie it to your Apple Watch, your Fitbit, and you go running, and it maps your runs, and it tells you how fast you went, and you can compete and do all this other stuff. Full disclosure, I don't use it, as you can tell. But their nerds got together and said, hey, we're collecting GPS data from all over the world, and we've got millions and millions of users. What if we just overlaid that on a map? How cool would that be? And so they created the global heat map of Strava, right? And so you can see that the Europeans are much more healthy than we are. That's to be assumed. But then you can start going, this is my hometown of Seattle, and you can go in and see what are the running routes, what are the biking roads, where are people at, where aren't they? And this can help you make great decisions. I'm going to go running on this pathway because more people are, right? So in their minds, they're thinking, great, we're going to show people where everyone else is, you're going to be safer, you're going to be better, all of this. So zoom back out to the world, and if you notice, there's a couple of little hot spots out here in the desert that just happen to be in war-torn areas and just happen to have very symmetrical patterns that show up in the middle of the Afghani desert. Well, come to find out, soldiers that were stationed at secret bases overseas were wearing their Fitbits, running around and uploading that data to the cloud unknowingly, because they were using Strava, and Strava unknowingly started mapping all of these secret bases that were all over the world. And so they had to publish something out saying, hey everyone, all you special forces guys, take off your Fitbits, stop uploading your data to the cloud. But it was too late, because once you overlaid it, you could see the bases and you could tell where they were from the Google Maps. So just because you could, should you? Right? Think of the implications here. And if they would have thought, okay, maybe there's some areas where we should just blur data, or we should look at that data before we publish it and say, that looks weird. I wouldn't have thought of this first off. I would be with the, hey, this is a really cool technology crowd. But this is an idea of technology that can go sideways on you really quickly. And so collectively, big data knows more about us than we do. And we're constantly having data being collected on us, right? Sometimes it's being used for really good things. And for as much as everyone in the privacy world wants to rag on Facebook, and for really good reasons, they are doing good. So if you start posting things that are indicating that you are going to hurt yourself, or somebody flags a post of yours as, hey, this person may be hurting themselves, Facebook will flag that. They've got systems and algorithms out there that will read your posts and say, hey, do you need to talk to someone or call a hotline? That's pretty cool. They're using their technology to save lives. The other thing, I don't have a slide on, but the other thing that they also had was the memories, right? So 2 years ago, this happened. 3 years ago, this happened. That's all fun. You get to see old pictures from college and old pictures from, like for me now when I have kids, I get to see all their baby pictures come up. But what they originally didn't think of was maybe the most liked post from 2 years ago isn't one that you want to see again, right? Your child commits suicide, and 3 years later, you get the reminder of that. Not a good thing. You're re-traumatizing people based on memories of an algorithm that just doesn't know. So they had to go in and put some filters in. And it's gotten better, but there was a lot of uproar originally around when that happened. Another example of big data knowing too much is Target decided to come out with this marketing campaign. And so they, this is a quote, it says, if we send someone a catalog and say, congratulations on your first child, and they never told us that they're pregnant yet, that's going to make some people uncomfortable, right? So what Target did, they tracked every purchase via anonymous ID on a credit card, And then what they looked at is when a woman signed up to for the baby registry, she entered a credit card, so they could then go backwards in history and see what did this person buy for the last year, right? So when they found out that they were first pregnant and they hadn't told anyone, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to buy dye-free soaps, they're going to go buy some vitamins, they're going to go buy some various things. And so they got really good at predicting, based on your purchases, you're probably pregnant. Well, fast forward, a father walks into a Target, and you all know where this is going, starts yelling at the store manager, how dare you send my daughter this coupon book for diapers and pregnancy items? She's not even pregnant, she's 15. A week later, he comes back in and apologizes and says, sorry, she didn't tell me, nobody knew about it. And Target knew that his daughter was pregnant before he did, right? And so this is where we get to with that. It's like, we are very conservative about compliance, and even with we're following all the laws, but you can still do things that make people a little queasy. In the US, we don't have enough laws, in my opinion, and that gives a lot more room for more and more queasiness. And so what we run into is the old saying, it's Latin, I can't pronounce it properly, I'm sure, but it's qui custodius ipsos custodes, and it's who watches the watchman, right? It's a time-old tale of you put somebody in power, you give somebody responsibility, but who's watching them? And right now, we don't have much of that going on in the tech world. We're starting to get there. Facebook was just fined, which is a step in the right direction, even though their stock went up afterwards because everyone thought they were going to be fined more money. So they're like, hey, profits, awesome. And so we need to start thinking about what are the unintended consequences of our creations? What are the unintended consequences of things that we build? And so technology, as we build it, has as we were talking about going back to Drupal, has the power to change millions upon millions of lives around the world every day, for the better or for the worse. And we always talk about the 80-20 paradox. 80% of the problems come from 20% of the code, or 80% of the users. There's always a way that you slice this down, but the one that we normally use in dev is build it for the 80. If 20% doesn't work, that's fine. It's the minority. Let's go. But what happens to the 20%? What happens to the 1%? That if you're building a platform that's touching 1 billion people, 1% is still a hell of a lot of people, right? And so you're creating these experiences that are either through accessibility, not accessible, or through privacy. You're traumatizing people, or you're causing grief. And so, as my dad, the brilliant technologist that he is, as I was growing up and he was teaching me how to code as a young kid, he would always tell me computers are only as smart as the people programming them, which was always a little subtle dig at me saying, you got to do better, right? We had a whole tough love thing. But we have the ability, and that's what I'm trying to focus on here, is that we may not be at STRAVA, and this is a really unique opportunity for me to be speaking at a government-minded function, because we, as the government, 300 plus million people are affected by the code that we're publishing every day. Yes, it's Drupal. Yes, it's a little module, but millions upon millions upon millions of people are impacted on a daily basis by every line of code that you write. If you have a chance and you're open to ideas from outside the Drupal sphere, Morten Rand Hendrickson over in WordPress gave an amazing talk at WordPress Europe in 2018. This is the only talk where I saw the crowd in tears, and it was like the question and answer system afterwards was like a therapy session. People were crying. It was awesome.
I'll go back.
So yeah, WordCamp Europe, it's on their website. They've got videos of it. It's awesome. And he's got a whole range of things. This is a topic he talks about on a broader scale, not just WordPress, but in general. And so as the Drupal community, we can and should take that responsibility with, with some weight. We have the ability to provide our developers and the site builders and the people who are using our technology with the tools to create privacy in their sites, to create accessibility. But are we, right? Are we doing that? As a Drupal community, I would argue that we also have the ethical responsibility of doing that, not just the, hey, we can and we should. It's like, this is what we should be doing. This is for the good of humanity. We are building something that is impacting millions of lives, and we have that opportunity, and ethically we should be taking that stand. Unfortunately, right now, we're not doing anything at all. And so we need a privacy initiative to become a participant in the future of the open web. If we want the future web for our children to be a place where it's safe and it's private and you can have that experience that we all grew up with, why aren't we building it? Why aren't we taking the stand to do it? We have the technology that powers all of these experiences. Luckily, we're trying. So this is an initiative that myself and a few others are putting together, and we're trying to get a core set of privacy tools to be put into core, hopefully for Drupal 9-ish, or at least introduced in Drupal 9. So that way we can start, rather than leading from behind and saying, well, this is all really good stuff, if somebody were to build it, we can actually do it. But how does that get done, right? It's always great to sit up here and pontificate about how, we have this responsibility and we're squandering it, we're not doing anything. And we're already starting to put the process together. And so myself, I'm involved not only in Drupal, I'm also involved in WordPress. But in talking with, WordPress actually has a core privacy team. And prior to GDPR, they shipped a set of core privacy tools that allow for some really fun features, right? So as a plugin developer, I can declare all the data that I'm tracking, and then I can disclose that as part of an initiation hook. From that, when a user goes to the website and they don't know anything about a privacy policy, they don't know anything about how to, or what plugins they're using, or if a plugin is tracking them or isn't, they go to a site or a page on the site, they click a button, and it will generate a standard privacy policy for them with, here are all the modules or all the plugins you're using and all the data that they're tracking. So it gives a system for that type of disclosure. They have a system for the right to be forgotten, so you can have users submit requests to be deleted. Data portability, they've got a way to identify what data is in the system and where is it going. After seeing that and seeing that we have nothing, I started talking with them and saying, hey, what if we collaborated on this? Because we're obviously not doing anything. You're doing a ton of cool stuff. So we kind of threw up and said, hey, let's, we threw it out there and said, we're going to start a cross-CMS privacy working group. Then, as you can tell from the URL, Joomla hopped on board. Again, Joomla's got an awesome privacy team, part of core, part of everything they do. And they're also really good at posting notes, and they were like the secretaries in the meetings. They were just typing all the notes out and posting them up before we were even done. So we now have WordPress, Joomla, Umbraco, Typo3, Drupal-ish, all working together to say, we're going to at least try to, because most of us are PHP-based, create some sort of common framework that we can all implement. And the first step of that is we've put together, and you'll see it on the GitHub repo, is we put kind of a treatise out there, and we said, these are our goals, these are what we stand for, and this is what we're going to try to achieve. And the idea is, if we can set a baseline of parameters for what privacy means for our CMSs, then we can build the tools towards them, we can share amongst each other. But the other really cool thing about this, and the opportunity that we have today here at a government conference, is the CMSs that are represented in this group represent nearly 42% of the web, right? That's a massive chunk of the web. And if you think about technologies that run 40+%, they have the ability to push and pull the web with them, right? But we're not doing that. So what happens when GDPR comes along, or what happens when CCPA or any of the legislations come along? We're sitting in the back, we're coding our things, we're creating and we're doing all this stuff, and then we just get really angry and shake our fist at the clouds and say, why are you regulating me? Like, that's not right, or like that's impossible to do. But we're not standing up and talking to them. So the idea from this working group is that we can also then create a privacy advocacy group that's then going to start reaching into the different policy decisions to be able to start saying, from a technology point of view, here's what 40% of the web is already committed to and doing. Here's where we're going. Here's what and try to have that conversation so that we're not in a reactive state, we're in a proactive state when it comes to the policies that guide us. And so A really good example of this, and folks that are leading the way, is the World Wide Web Foundation has published out. Again, there's a lot of folks that are starting to look at what we have as the web and say that something needs to change. And so their change is they want to have a contract for the web. And it states for governments, here's what you're going to do. You're going to ensure that everyone can connect to the internet. You're going to keep all of the internet available, and you're going to respect people's fundamental rights to privacy. So as a government, you're not going to pull the internet away if somebody's writing against you. As a government, here's what we expect as a government you should be doing. But then it also says, as a company, you're going to make the internet affordable and accessible. Don't price it out of the reach of the lowest part of your society. We're going to respect consumers' privacy, and we're going to develop technologies that support the best in humanity and challenge the worst. I'm all for people building awesome technology, but do it in a way that doesn't give a platform for extremism, that doesn't give a platform for cyberbullying. But then as citizens, we also have a responsibility in this. And our responsibility is to be creators and collaborators, to build strong communities that respect civil discourse. It's not that you have to think like us and you have to talk like us. Just don't be an ass. Like, it's not that hard, but we have to build that in. We have to build that community, right? And then if companies and governments aren't doing that, we need to be able to step up and fight for the web. And we do a really good job at that, of like turning off, we're going to turn the internet off and every site's going to go black. And we like make people think about, there are a lot of things that run the web, and all these websites that I go to every day affect my life. But then we go back to business, and we flip the site back on, and we need to be able to be better at fighting for the web. And so with that, I want you to think about the impact of your code. Think about the impact of the modules that you're building, the content that you're creating, the platforms that you're building, whether it's for yourself, for your agency that you're working for, or just in general. And think about the unintended consequences. And together, we can build the web for the future generations that we want them to have. And it's up to us as creators and developers to do that. So my name's Chris Teitzel. I'm from Locker. And then with that, questions, thoughts, it's totally fine if this is more of a comment than a question. Normally people hate that. Bring it on. I love that. Yes?
I know that the Federal Trade Commission works a lot in privacy as far as in particular with children's privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the same do they have the same sort of policy for just general web privacy?
No. So the closest thing, or let me put it this way, from my understanding, no. I'm all of this prefaced, I'm not a lawyer, don't take my advice for anything. The closest thing that we have for a general privacy policy is the CCPA, and it's California Consumer Protection Privacy Act. But the CCPA governs California. Granted, all of the web runs through California, and so it is becoming the de facto standard for the US web. In my opinion, in the federal, the tension between the federal and the state level, the feds don't really like states telling them what to do, so that pushes the onus onto the federal government to actually step up and do something. There are bills being worked on and policies being put in place. And so yeah, there are little things for, the FTC is the one that fined Facebook for their privacy violations, right? For general privacy violations. So there are enforcement mechanisms, but they're few and far between, and they're not really well defined. It's more after something wrong has happened, then they come back and be like, you probably should have done this better, we're going to fine you, and then make it better. But we haven't, as a government, stood up and said, this is what you should be doing, in a real clear way, in my opinion, similar to how GDPR is being run. And it's not that GDPR is perfect by any means, but it's a great step forward. One of the things that we do run into, though, with GDPR, and Heather Burns from the WordPress project has a really good series of slides on this, is that we have to think about privacy in the same way, or in light of our social environments as well. In the EU, they have a higher trust in government and a less trust in business. And so with GDPR, it's the government saying this is what's going to happen. Flip that, in the US, we have a high distrust in the government and a high trust in business. And we say, oh, Facebook's big, they're going to do the right thing, right? Or we'll wait for the courts to decide because everyone's going to speak with their pocketbook, and once someone gets sued, that's when we'll start doing things, right? We'll wait, and someone's going to get sued for GDPR, then we'll figure it all out. So we have an inherent trust in businesses that they're going to do the right thing, and that capitalism will speak, and that the dollars will speak. And so we have to look at how we form our privacy policies in that light. Because if the US government comes down hard like GDPR does, it's going to be met with a lot of pushback because it's just our nature as US citizens. And so we can't just drag and drop GDPR and clone it over. We have to make it our own. But yeah, there's no real binding federal framework for that yet. The closest is going to be CCPA, which is January 1, 2020. So you'll probably start hearing about it December 1, 2019. So, yeah. Yeah.
Have you found any good ways to translate some of the abstract language you might find in a privacy policy to real world implications? Because even as a technical person, I struggle with that, and I don't know what a company might use my information for.
Yeah. So that's one of the pieces of GDPR that I like the most is that it states that the privacy policy needs to be accessible and readable to the general public, right? So you can't, in the US right now, what we can do is we can hire a really good lawyer who's going to put a lot of Latin words and legalese in there and confuse the hell out of everyone, and they're just like, all right, well, again, we trust the business, go do what you need to do, right? GDPR says, no, you have to put this in a readable form. So sources for that, no. I would always recommend that you have a lawyer write or be involved in your privacy policy because it's what's going to be used against you if you're accused of violating somebody's privacy. But that is a great requirement that I think should be in every privacy policy.
To that, I don't remember the name, but I think there are now websites that come up that read the privacy documents of big companies and
and it will
start to translate it into they will allow what are they allowed to do with my pictures and stuff like that.
Right.
It's like the watch groups of the
right.
Watchmen, they start to come up. I Google for it, but you will probably find it. But yeah, GDPR requires that to do the company by themselves. But I have to say, even reading the GDPR stuff,
it's not. Yeah, and the thing is, GDPR was written in a vague manner, almost on purpose, because in my opinion, they didn't know where it was going to lead, so they wanted to leave themselves wiggle room and not get too detailed. B, they wanted to kind of see the reaction of it. But then it allows for interpretation of it. But in the flip side of that, yeah, there's no this is what the standard for readability should be, right?
Well, I think the part of the GDPR is as an individual, I can ask the company about where they are using my information.
Yeah, so that is, so when we look at privacy, there's kind of three core tenets that I always look at. And it's consent, which is number one. What am I going to be doing with your data? Where am I putting it? Who am I giving it to and why? So, and do you consent to that? So that's number one. Number two is data portability. So that's what you're talking about of, I want to request all the information because GDPR puts the data in the ownership of the individual, and the business is just interacting with it. But it's the owner's data, it's their property, it's their right or their person. In the US, it's almost opposite, where the business owns the data, and then we have to ask for it back, or we have to do something. So portability says, I want my data because I want to be able to take it from you and give it to somebody else and have a common standard of what that is. And then the third one is the right to be forgotten, the right of deletion, and being able to say, remove me from your database and never have me again. One of my favorite stories about this, and it's not my favorite because of the example, but favorite because of how shady it was, is Ashley Madison, which is a website that was, if you don't know, it's a website where you I don't even know if they're still in business, I hope they aren't, but it was for married individuals to go on and have affairs, and the whole thing was find other married individuals who want to have an affair. what ended up happening was you would get on it, you would find out that all the profiles are fake because they had developers that were just creating fake profiles and pulling pictures off the web. But then you would say, okay, this doesn't work, or prior to this, delete me. And they would come back and be like, we'll turn off your account, but if you want us to delete you, that's going to be an extra $50, right? Because do you really want your wife or your husband or your spouse to know that you've been on this site? We know, and we'll keep that information, but for $50, we'll remove it. So then people would swipe their credit card, do the other $50 charge, and they never got rid of it. They just kept it in the database and kept it there.
It's a soft delete.
What's that?
It's a soft delete.
Right.
I think they are still.
To add some comedy to that, when that breach came out, there were several missed.gov emails in there.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh, I'm sure there were several .gov emails in
I
there.
was in the security meeting that was talking about that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there were some lovely conversations that were to be had after that about where you use your work email.
We had just moved, and the people who lived there were, like, Fairfax Underground published everyone who lived in Fairfax.
Oh yeah.
It was there, and our address was in there.
Oh, yeah.
The previous owner.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, you must have had some interesting people knocking on your door. So what ended up happening with that breach was it was a developer, an internal developer, that just got tired of it and said, I'm tired of being part of this system. And they had no network segmentation, and so a master password to one gave access to everything, and they got in, scraped the whole thing, and started publishing everything online. So A, network segmentation is good. B, don't be an evil company and don't foster that type of activity. So, but yeah, it's that type of thing where the right to be forgotten really means to delete, right? But that again goes to our inherent trust in the company to do what we say that they're going to do, right? The people of Ashley Madison trusted that when they swiped their credit card and paid the extra $50 that they were going to delete it, but they didn't. So
I work for a research program now, and one of our difficulties is that we have a privacy policy. Then we have other individuals who work for the same research program whose job is to get the data and analyze it and marketing.
mm-hmm.
And those are sort of competing forces in my mind. And so ultimately we end up not abiding by our own privacy policy. So how can we sort of enforce that internally? What are the sort of mechanisms to make your own organization behave?
Right. So if you look at, I was reading an article on the ethics of AI. And how this conversation's coming up a lot with AI, not necessarily around privacy policies and such, but somewhat, is that AI to me is that next frontier, right? Social media, it's dead, it's gone, that box has been opened, we're never going to get that back. Nazis will always be on social media and we can't stop it. And if you want an example of that, Mastodon is now dealing with Gab and all the Nazis and white supremacists that are coming off of Gab, and they just started using Mastodon. And now Mastodon's like, shit, we got a Nazi problem, we got to get them off of here now, right? And so social media is dead. AI is the next level, but AI is way more powerful. And so they're trying to figure out the ethics of AI. And so Google set up an ethics board, which miserably failed into a PR nightmare because they had people on there that were controversial. And but going back to your point, if you look at the intent of what Google did, is they said, we want to have dissent internally. They reacted to that dissent from their employees that said, no, that's bad, stop that. And Google said, okay. You flip that, our hometown hero, Amazon, has been doing stuff with facial recognition recently, and employees will speak out about it, and then they're no longer employees, right? And so part of it is, as a company, fostering that culture of dissent, that it's okay to be a dissenter. It's okay to say, I think we're doing this wrong, and bring it up internally, because it's better that somebody internally brings that up and you react to it then, than the New York Times or somebody end up suing you and they bring it up. So from a business perspective, the way that I would handle it, because as a business owner, if somebody came to me internally that said that, is that's a business problem. That's going to affect my bottom line at some point, or affect the group at some point. So we need to handle it at the business level. And so maybe coming at it from that aspect of saying, this is a business thing. We need to look at this as a security of our business and viability of our group. We need to start living by what we post out there, or change our privacy policy to state what we're doing. Because it's not that it may not be inherently wrong that you're sharing that data with the outside folks that you are, or how you're sharing the data. It's just that you're not disclosing how you're doing it. And that disclosure then needs the consent of people, and then you're like, okay, it's all fine.
So you sounded like it's very hard to get the privacy group inside of Drupal core.
It's been a push.
What is the problem? Like,
so I think it's really easy to ring a bell on my own. And there's a few folks that are ringing a bell. Luckily, I have a platform that I can do it from that's a little broader. I have speaking opportunities to do that. In our discussions internally with I talked with Dries briefly about it, and he's like, yeah, sounds great. But he's like, we need a proposal, we need a budget, we need this, and this. And I'm like, budget? Like, I don't need a budget. Just give us the authority to do it, and we'll go do it. So part of it is we just need buy-in from the core committing team. And so that's what that idea is. This is the official way that you get an initiative started. So it follows the charter that says, here's what we want to do, here's how we're going to do it, here are the people, here are the processes, all that. That needs to have core committers go on, comment, yep, I approve of this. Then it goes from the ideas to the core track, it gets created as a core ticket, and then it can be started to work on. That's the piece that we're working on. So right now it's just politicking, and it's if it's not just me and a few others ringing that bell, and the more people that are bringing it up, after Dries's article last week, I think there's a good opportunity to say, look, this is top of mind now, and it's something that we should look at.
And I think if you're a government employee, if you're working with the government, people have the power to say, like, hey, if you guys don't start doing this, if you don't start really thinking about privacy issues, the government's going to legislate it, and suddenly governments aren't going to be able to use Drupal as their website anymore.
Right. And so
Privacy stuff.
that's where I get to with this, is like, if we want to be a participant in the future web, we have to have this. It's not a question. If you look at the GDPR module, I think it has like 2,000 sites using it. Run some rough numbers on how many Drupal websites are in the EU, and you realize that a lot of people aren't even using the quasi-unofficial, official GDPR module. They're just either rolling their own or not doing it, or they're trying to figure it out, or they're going elsewhere, right? And I've already seen it happen where enterprises are sitting there going, they're creating the pros and cons of all the different platforms, AEM, Sitecore, Drupal, WordPress, and they're all looking them down. And privacy is now on that, and we're a big blank in that because we don't have something. So yeah, I think it's momentum. It's just getting the conversation out there that, hey, there are people that are doing this. We have the backing of the WordPress group, and Joomla and all of them are willing to help us. We have you'll find it on the GitHub repo, but we have a chat room that we're all in. And every time I'm like, hey, I'm going to go speak on this, they're all like, go get him, Chris. Like, so we have Joomla backing us now too. But yeah, it's a lot of that. But I think at the end of the day, in the US, money speaks. And so if we start to have the push from the government and from the enterprises saying, if you don't do this, we're going to drop Drupal and go elsewhere, that's going to happen. I think the problem is, though, if we get to that point, it's already too late. And we're already going to start losing people. Any other thoughts, ideas, concerns? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. The end of the day, I know it's a weighty topic, but have a great rest of the conference and a good night tonight.